This is the IKier 1064 nanometer 20-watt fiber laser module. So, what's special about this laser? This 20-watt pulse fiber laser promises to be capable of deep engraving, high-speed engraving, but most importantly, metal cutting. So far, we have seen laser engravers that can mark metal. But aside from the X tool, most are not entirely successful. So it's very exciting to see this potential game changer for metal. Most 455 nanometer lasers can mark some metals, as you might have seen in our previous reviews, but a 1064 nanometer gives you a wider range of metals to work with, such as copper, iron, aluminum, zinc, silver, etc. This laser has the potential of replacing our X tool, which has a 1064 nanometer 2-watt laser. So the IKier 20-watt laser is exponentially more powerful. In fact, this is the first 1064 nanometer wavelength infrared fiber laser engraving machine with an optical power of up to 20 watts. The IKier 1064 nanometer 20-watt fiber laser module can be purchased separately, and it's compatible with IKier's K1 laser engraver line. In this review, we'll be taking a look at the specs and also putting this laser to the test with multiple materials. If you're ready to upgrade your engraving game, this review is for you. So keep watching. Welcome back to Space Age Tech, where we look at the tech that pushes the limits. Let's see what's in the box. This laser comes in a not so fancy box on the outside, but on the inside it's very nicely laid out and cushioned for protection. The first thing you'll notice, of course, is our instruction manual. Keep this with your most treasured possessions, or you can look it up online whenever you need it. In the top left here, we have our controller and laser module. This is our mighty 1064 nanometer laser module. It has an engraving accuracy of 0.01 millimeters, repeatability of 0.1 millimeters, and the spot size of 0.03 by 0.06 millimeters. This is a control box and laser module. It has a robust and sturdy feel, but it will take up some working room in your shop, being that the control box is about 13 by 7 inches. The control box has a frequency adjustment button from 30 kHz to 60 kHz. IKier does provide a parameter table on their website and on the manual, but it's safe to say that you would most likely use the 30 kHz for cutting and engraving most material. Here we have our Z-axis component and laser slider. We also have a few cables, our Type-C data cable, our laser signal cable, and of course our power cable. We also have safety glasses. Remember to always wear these when the laser is in operation. This is our dedicated control box. The control box can connect to Wi-Fi. It has power outage renewal carving, anti-tipping sensors, automatic syncing cutting, parameter setting, and work progress viewing. Let's get ready to test. As you can see, with a bit of YouTube magic and a short 10 to 15 minute installation, we have attached the laser module to our K1 Ultra. Here we are demonstrating the frequency adjustment and the manual focus. Our first material is 0.5 millimeter copper. Here we will run two tests. one for engraving and the other one for cutting. For engraving, this machine has a high working speed of up to 900 millimeters per second, with an engraving accuracy of 0.01 millimeters. In this test, we're only going up to 150 millimeters per second and testing speeds below that for this copper sheet. We are also testing the power from 20% all the way to 100%. For our cutting test, we used 100% power and low speed on all tests, but the defining factor was the number of passes it took to make the cutout. For cutting, we were also able to get wonderful results. Again, we were able to get consistent results in most settings, where we could go as fast as 4 millimeters per second at 100% power and 25 passes to get a clean cut. We were pleasantly surprised with the engraving results. You can see here that with the exception on 20% power, 150 millimeter speed, we were able to mark the copper consistently, getting a range of colors from copper to red all the way to black. When thinking of your designs, you can take these colors into consideration. So all around great results. Let's try to make something. For our final copper test, we'll engrave a Celtic knot and cut it out as you would earrings or pendants. Here's our pendant after a few minutes. It turned out pretty clean. To finish this pendant, we would need to just slightly sand the edges to remove any sharpness. Our next test is on 0.5 millimeter aluminum sheet. Again, we are first going to run an engraving and then a cutting test. We are definitely getting fantastic results on most settings here. Let's move on to cutting. IKier recommends using 0.2 millimeter aluminum sheets for optimal cutting results. In this test, we're making it a bit tougher on the machine with a 0.5 millimeter aluminum sheet. You can see the sheet warp a little due to the excess heat that is building up by running this test. Of course, once we find our optimal settings, we can go with those to avoid any warping unless it's on purpose, of course. Here's a closer look at our results. For engraving, we saw a pretty clean line, somewhere between 60% power and 75 to 125 millimeters per second. For cutting, we had a bit of mixed results, getting the most success at 50 and 75 passes and 1 millimeter per second. Let's make our pendant, this time on aluminum sheets. Same design, different material. As you can see, the machine will do the engraving first, then the cutting part. The whole process only takes a few minutes, giving us a beautiful pendant. Here are our results. Again, to make this perfect, we would just need to sand the edges a little bit to ensure there's no sharpness. For our next test, we'll use aluminum again, but this is a much thicker sheet at 1.5 millimeters. Again, we'll run both an engraving and cutting test. As far as engraving, we were successful on pretty much all settings, although we'll take a closer look shortly. For cutting, we need to try the most powerful and slow setting we can get and try many passes. For this test, we only tested 1 millimeter per second and 50, 75, and 100 passes. In contrast with the previous test, we did not see the aluminum sheet warp in any way, but as expected, we were really unable to get through this material. Just engrave pretty deeply. Here is a closer look at our test results. We'll try our Celtic knot pendant on the 1.5mm aluminum. You can see how nicely this looks. Although we were not able to cut through this material, it would be great for engraving plaques. Let's move on to stainless steel. This is 0.5 millimeters. As you can see, we're getting some pretty good results engraving. You can also tell that there's a color variation depending on the settings. For cutting this 0.5 millimeter stainless steel sheet, we tried 100% power at 1 millimeter per second and 50, 75, and 100 passes. Luckily, we were able to get cutouts on each of these settings. Now it's just a matter of choosing the right settings so we can avoid scorching or warping of this stainless steel sheet. To get a better idea of what settings are most effective, it's worth looking at the underside. Here you can see we had some scorching on the higher power settings for engraving and higher passes for cutting. This is something to pay attention to on your projects to find the optimum results where there's no charring or scorching. Let's try our pendant design now. As you can see, the settings are not quite right, so we are getting some warping of the metal, which is becoming too hot. We could potentially say this test was successful since we were able to both cut and engrave. But in reality, a lot more testing would need to happen to find the optimal settings to obtain a feasible product on this material. In this test, we tried our pendant design on 0.2 millimeter galvanized sheet metal using the parameter table settings. If you have seen our other reviews, this would normally be where most other machines leave us hanging. But in this case, we are truly making progress. The results are not as pristine as we would like. But with fine-tuning, we could make a feasible product. This opens a whole world of possibilities for this material. Now that we have seen what the IKier 1064 nanometers 20-watt fiber laser module can do on metal, let's try other non-metal materials. Here we are testing 6mm black polycarbonate sheets. From what we can see in the higher power, lower speed settings, we are getting some melting and fumes are coming out. This is where we remind you that whenever you use any engraver, make sure it is in a very well ventilated place and preferably inside an enclosure where you can exhaust the fumes. We did have to try this test a few more times to get it just right. You can see the difference between our first and last test here and the melting or burning that we experienced. We were not very successful with our cutting test since this is a pretty thick material. The engraving, however, was excellent, as you can see from our results. We decided to go for the Celtic knot engraving so you can see the end product. Here is a closer look of our 6mm polycarbonate engraving. As you can see, we had pretty clean results. Most importantly, there was no melting or warping of the material. For our next test, let's try smoked polycarbonate. This is 1.5 millimeters, which is a lot thinner than our 6mm black polycarbonate. Also note that this material is not completely clear. It does have a dark tint, which helps with the engraving and cutting. Let's try a cutting test on our 1.5mm smoked polycarbonate. For this test, we are using one pass and testing from 20% to 100% power, and speeds from 1 millimeter per second to 10 millimeters per second. From what we can observe, at higher power and lower speed, we are getting some melting on this material. Let's go over our engraving results. On the engraving test, you'll find that the higher speed and lower power works very well. We ran this test a couple of times to fine-tune the settings. Optimal results were obtained in the range of 30 to 50% power and a speed above 300 millimeters per second. You can also see that we had 3 different shades of color depending on the power being used. While we were not able to get a clean cut from this material, we felt that additional testing is needed, perhaps something with higher speed and multiple passes. However, this is a great material to use and oftentimes is used for signs. So here we are attempting to engrave our Celtic knot design, and as you can see, it's actually turning out pretty nice. And here's a closer look at our Celtic knot engraving on 1.5 millimeter smoked polycarbonate. We are being a little more successful with the black acrylic, so this time let's try a 3 millimeter sheet. You can see we have a wide range to work with as far as engraving, so we'll use something like 45% power and about 400 millimeters per second speed. We then tried engraving our Celtic knot design again. Check out how it turned out. Pretty nice. Up next, we'll try a material we have not used before. This is neoprene rubber. For this one, we will just cut and engrave using the standard settings. And here's our end result. We got pretty good results in the first try, although we didn't really enjoy working with these materials because of the amount of fumes. For our last test, we'll try 6 millimeter ABS. Here we're using the standard settings for engraving. As you can see, although we can engrave on this material, it was not a good result as it has a melted appearance. More fine-tuning will be needed. And those are all of our tests. What did you think? We were impressed by the IKier 1064 nanometer 20 watt fiber laser module and its ability to work with different metals. This really does open up a whole new world of possibilities for those working with diode lasers. From jewelry to plaques to anything in between, this module wins the cake. And we are happy to say that we are looking forward to replacing our X tool with the IKier. Before you make a decision, let's recap on our test results. This laser module had very impressive results on 0.5 millimeter copper. We were really surprised at its ability to both engrave and cut this material. Here you can see our final product, which is our Celtic knot pendant. For 0.2 millimeter galvanized sheet metals, we also had some pretty good results. There's still some refining to do, but you can see that these results are promising, especially considering that most other laser engravers we've tried have failed with this material. For our 0.5 millimeter stainless steel, we also had some promising results. Although these were not at all a finished product, we would still need to fine-tune this so we can get a great project. This is our 1.5 millimeter aluminum sheet. For this material, we had some impressive engraving results, although we could not make significant cuts on this material. For optimal results on aluminum, IKier does recommend a 0.2 millimeter thickness. We had a lot better results with 0.5 millimeter aluminum. This result was near perfect, and we got some pretty cool colors as well. Our rubber sheet did pretty good on the first try. We are hoping the lines were cleaner, but this does show some promise. Our ABS did pretty well on engraving, but we could not cut through this material. For our polycarbonate test, we tried two types of polycarbonate. The first one being this 6mm black polycarbonate sheet. And we also tried smoked polycarbonate, which was 1.5 millimeters. We were able to engrave both materials very nicely, but we were not able to cut through them for the most part. We experienced some melting on both of the polycarbonate materials and were not able to get clean cutouts. A lot more testing would need to be done in order to get the perfect settings for cutting polycarbonate. Still, we were very happy with the engraving results. Finally, let's take a look at our 3mm acrylic engraving test. As you can see, this is a great material to engrave and you can use a wide range of settings. Our design came out pretty nice and clean and we were happy with our results. So, what did you think? We'll be reviewing this and other amazing technology in our upcoming videos. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow.